Ladies and gentlemen, a little bit late at night, but we are still here. It's your boys, the OG play callers, coming to you live and direct. Big news in the world of sports happening, right? So we're definitely going to talk about it because that's what we do around these parts, you know? And this is your boy, Cool McCain, and I am joined this week, as always, by my co host.
That would be your boy, Stephen Box.
And if it's your first time, you haven't been here in a while and you forgot, or, we just need to reintroduce ourselves, here's who we are. So, biggest piece of breaking news that happened right before we hopped on the air is the trade of Trey Lance for a mid-round pick. I think I read it was a fourth maybe, um, to from the San Francisco 49ers to the Dallas Cowboys, aka the Arlington football team. So my co-host, of course, is a diehard 49ers fan. What are your thoughts on this trade, sir?
So I'm going to look at this from two different perspectives.
Mhm.
One, I'm going to look at this from the perspective of what the actual trade is, and then I'm going to look at it from the bigger perspective. Okay.
Okay.
So in terms of what the actual trade is, I haven't seen exactly. I just saw a mid-round pick, so I don't know if that's a third, a fourth, whatever. Uh, Obviously, disappointing to only get that in return based on what was given up to acquire Trey Lance in the first place. But for his lack of experience and where he is now, I think that it's probably the absolute best that we could have hoped for. So it is what it is. Would I maybe have rather kept him? Sure. I mean, I think that considering that even next year he's only going to cost like $5 million, it would have made sense to hold on to him. But what this tells me is we did not want to go into the season with four quarterbacks on the roster because we were afraid that we would not be able to keep Brandon Allen as the practice squad quarterback. We thought somebody would certainly come and pick him up if we try to put him on the practice squad. So that's where I see this kind of going. So I think on one hand, people might say, well, it would have made more sense if you knew you were going to possibly trade him, go ahead and name him as the backup. But in doing so, you basically would have kind of signaled to people that you're not trading him, right? So if this was your goal, was to go ahead and trade him and get what you could for him, making him the number three quarterback actually makes a lot more sense because that's going to send a more clear signal to people to say he's up for trade. So I'm going to look at it from that perspective. Now, what I do want to comment on real quick is a lot of the commentary that I'm seeing from fans and media, and not just in regards to what happened a couple hours ago here, but also just over the last week or so. Is I've been seeing a lot of comments about how poorly we treated Trey Lance, how unprofessionally things were handled, and all this other stuff. And this is what I'm going to say. It's a very unfortunate circumstance, right? Trey Lance comes in, he gets hurt his first season and preseason, actually ended up hurting his finger. And I think that impacted his ability to get in and get maybe some snaps early on. I think there maybe was some original intention to play a little bit more two quarterback system in the beginning, but when he hurt his hand, that kind of pushed back on that. Trey did end up getting to play two starts that year with Jimmy out, but obviously Jimmy Garoppolo healthy was the better quarterback that year. Next year comes around, we basically say, you know what, we're going all in. Trey's the guy. We're going to hand him the offense. We're going to change some things around, cater it to him a little bit. I mean, it wasn't a lot of changes, but you did kind of change a few things, right? You did end up bringing Jimmy Garoppolo back as a backup, but you made Jimmy take a pay cut to make less money than Trey. So you did everything you could to say Trey Lance is our guy. He goes out week one, plays that ugly, nasty, muddy game in Chicago. We didn't get a chance to really see him there. Next week, Seattle, he breaks his leg, right? And then we all know the rest of the story. Brock Purdy comes in and looks absolutely amazing. And I don't think anybody reasonably is saying that Brock Purdy shouldn't have come into the year as the presumed starter based on the way he played last year, right? And I think you really kind of gave Trey an opportunity. But I think at the end of the day, there was something that Kyle Shanahan fell in love with before the draft about Trey Lance. And I think he maybe overlooked some of Trey's flaws. And to be clear, his flaws are 100% experience based. I think that from a talent standpoint, Trey is a very talented player. I think he has the physical tools. And if he can get an opportunity to get more reps and get more playing time, I think he can be a great player in the league. I still do believe that to be true. But I think there were some flaws in his game that maybe we glossed over because Kyle Shanahan fell in love with the potential of what he thought Trey Lance could be. And instead of doing something smart like drafting Justin Fields, we ended up taking Trey Lance, and here we are. So, at the end of the day, man, if I'm John Lynch, you better go out there and do whatever you got to do to win a Super Bowl this year, next year, because if you don't, somebody at some point is going to go, hey, you want to be accountable for those draft picks you gave up to go get Trey Lance that you basically spent for nothing. So to me, that puts a lot more pressure onto the team to be able to win, because you obviously could have drafted several other guys in that position, even if you had just stayed at 12. So, I think some of the criticism is fair, but I also think that a lot of the criticism about not treating professionally or not giving him a chance is a little bit unfair to the organization, because it's not their fault that he went out there and got injured any more than it's his, right? I mean, these were just things that just happened. It's unfortunate he just never got the chance. And, I don't know how much of a chance he's going to get in Dallas either, but at least he has an opportunity to be able to go somewhere where he can possibly at least get some reps in and get some experience, and hopefully he'll grow as a player.
So, question from Daniel Gilbert. So Daniel Gilbert asks, have they said what he gave up? I'm actually trying to see now if I can find that information.
Yeah, all I've seen so far is mid-round draft pick, which I personally think mid-round could be anything between a third and a fifth, right? I mean,
they traded to Dallas for a fourth round pick. It was confirmed by CBS Sports.
it was a fourth round. Okay.
Yeah, so
And,
it
and
was
like
a fourth round. I thought that's
yeah,
what I had seen, but I wanted to make sure.
yeah, like I said, I mean, in all honesty, just based on his experience and the way he's looked when he has got, that's probably about the best we could have honestly expected for him.
And Daniel Gilbert says, not if, but when Dak will get hurt. So I'll give you my thoughts here. As an outsider looking, I think one thing that people have to realize is there was a full year that Trey Lance had to develop behind Jimmy Garoppolo. I think if we leave that part out, shout out Steve. What's going on, Steve? Thanks for hopping in and checking us out. If you leave the part out about the fact that Trey Lance had a full year behind Jimmy Garoppolo, where he was developing, where he was kind of like the guy if Jimmy Garoppolo got hurt, then I think you kind of have an argument. Let's say he was a rookie last year, he got hurt, and he doesn't get a chance this year. I think it's a bum rap for Trey Lance. Don't get me wrong, but at the same time, it's not really something that's going to really help them, right? It's not going to really help you be any better. So what they had to do from that perspective was say, look, we got this guy, we drafted him, we made a mistake.
Mm-hmm.
And not that he can't be a quarterback in the NFL, but maybe he can't be a quarterback for us. The system that we want to run, the way we want to play, he may not fit that system.
Yeah.
I said all along with you, that Justin Fields should have been the second quarterback off the board, and there's no way San Francisco should have let him pass them by.
Yep.
There was a time, and we talk about this every couple of years, has happened, where people start to get enamored with certain people and how they play.
Mm-hmm.
Doesn't matter if it's good or not. This kid played 1 year in college, so you understood he was a project. So you brought on a project, You had the project year with him. You had the second year where you had the setbacks of him getting injured. We moved past that. What do we get? We get a guy that the organization lost faith in. They sent him home. You know, I think when they told him, "Hey, you're not even going to be the backup," I'm sure that he wasn't happy about it. I doubt that he got crazy or did anything out of the way. But I
Yeah.
feel that you wouldn't have been happy about being told, "Hey, you're not even going to be the starter. You're going to be the third string." I mean, you're looking at Sam Darnold. You're like, "Come on, bro, that's who's going to be the backup over me." I mean, you probably felt some kind of way.
Yeah.
And I think you're at a point where you're like, "Well, if we can get some decent value for Trey Lance, let's go ahead and do that before we devalue him even more by
Yeah.
allowing him to stay on the team." So what this tells me is if you're a mobile quarterback, you better not go to San Francisco. Go somewhere where they have a system in place for that. Understand, and obviously this is not draft because you can't help where you're drafted. But if you're a guy that's a mobile quarterback and you're looking for a team to go to, I would not go to San Francisco. Now, if I'm a traditional quarterback or a quarterback that can move but still is mainly a thrower, then San Francisco looks like a place for me. But the last two quarterbacks that were kind of more mobile and less of a pure passer that went there, they have ended up leaving. So maybe the organization also now realizes, okay, for what we want to do, we need a guy that's more of a passer, right? And there's nothing wrong with that because every team has different systems and every team has different things that they want. A couple of comments here from Daniel Gilbert. I know he seems to be pretty excited about this conversation. So it says, I like the move because I feel this was a good move because at the end of the day, I feel this was his last year to prove he can get better and take us to the next level. I think he's referring to Dak Prescott.
Yeah.
I don't think. Well, I'll say that for a few moments from now. I like the move because at the end of the day, Dak has 1 year left to prove. So I think he's just cleaning up his original statement.
Yeah.
Well, no, I think he has some more information here. I like the move because at the end of the day, Dak has 1 year left to prove he can get to the next level. If he can't, our pickup should not be in top.
I think he's basically saying that they probably weren't going to be a team that was going to be picking like in the top 5.
Mm-hmm.
So they weren't going to be able to get a top tier quarterback anyway. So this is an opportunity for you to get a guy for cheap. You get a chance to see him for a year and you can kind of decide, is he a possible replacement for Dak or not?
And Anthony Price says, so what does this mean for Cooper Rush? I think absolutely nothing. And I'll say what? I'll say this very simply. Cooper Rush has been there. He understands the system. He understands the players, right? So yeah, you argue that they're going from one coordinator to the head coach being the coordinator. The head coach is an offensively focused head coach, so he's always going to dabble in the offensive side of the ball. Maybe not actual play calling, but routes, concepts, different things like that. He's always going to have a part of that if he's a more offensive focused head coach, just like a defensive focused head coach will be more focused on the defensive side of the ball. So I think from that perspective, Cooper Rush has a heads up. Also, he's had game time and he's played well. What I think this could possibly affect Cooper Rush long term is you could see yourself as, even if they move on from that, still being the backup behind Trey Lance. So that could be an interesting possibility to come from the situation.
Yeah. Before people go get their panties in a wad here, do need people to actually understand that Trey is now going to have to go in and learn a brand new offense. We're right here basically at the start of the season. More than likely, Trey Lance is going to go in as the number 3 quarterback on Dallas' roster as well. So he may not stay there all year, right? But don't go get yourselves upset when you guys goes from being one third stringer to another.
So Daniel Gilbert says Cooper on last year of his deal, but yeah, who else is going to really sign Cooper Rush? I'm pretty sure he'll be back. He'll end up back with Dallas.
No, nobody's beating the door down for that one.
Yeah, nobody's beating the door down for that. And then Chris Jones, your fellow 49ers fan, says, peace, fellas. So will Amex be exchanging a lot of number 5 jerseys? Hey, that is a good question. And based on what they've promised, they should be doing that, Chris. So if you got a number 5, you use your Amex, hey, it's time to see if that is what they say is true. So Anthony says Trey went from a number 3 to another number 3. That's what it looks like to me. And then Dan says cards, laugh out loud.
Yeah.
Well,
I would just say this. Going back to your comment earlier about the mobile quarterbacks in San Francisco. This is when I said that I think there were certain elements that maybe we misjudged in the process.
Yes.
Remember, Kyle Shanahan, when after the selection, there was the media rounds like, "Oh, why did you take this guy? What did you like about him? Whatever." Right? And what he kept saying over and over was that they loved his ability to be able to be a pocket passer, but also to be effective with his feet and bring that element, right? So clearly, what he was saying was, I want a guy who's going to stand in the pocket, be a pocket quarterback, but has the athleticism to punish you with his legs and maybe occasionally do some design runs, right? And it's funny because when you actually think about the way that they ideally should have been using him would have been allowing him to use his legs more. But when they did that, what did everybody do? What are you doing running the quarterback?
Well, also, so right, third string to third string, really been living up to that Trey name.
The
I like
third,
that. I
the
like
third,
that, Chris. I
the,
like
the
that.
third, the third pick, third string. His name is Trey. I mean, it's like destiny or something, man. Don't
It's
name your
crazy,
children
man.
Trey. They'll just always.
Hey, it's crazy, man. The last thing I'll say personally on it though is from the Dallas perspective, right? Because if you're Dallas and you're making this move, you're thinking, hey, this is a kid we can get for a third round pick. Now we can say, all right, third round pick for Trey. Now what we can do is we can try to develop him. Because if we're being honest, and I know Cowboys fans may see this, you know, Dak Prescott is not the best at reading defenses, right? Not saying he's horrible, but he's not the best. He's probably middle of the road. So if you
Let's
can,
just say he's not going to be a great mentor.
so the other reason you're going to keep Cooper Rush is I think he's a guy that's better equipped to teach Trey how to read a defense and maybe be a different voice in his, you know, to try to see what they can extract from Trey.
Yeah.
To me, that's a big part. Now, another thing you always want to consider is fresh start sometimes help chip on your shoulder. Oh, San Francisco didn't want me, right? If Trey, there's two type of people. It's really just two types. I mean, you could break it down to all these other things, but it's the San Francisco didn't want me. Oh, I can't believe they didn't want me. And it kind of bothers you and it kind of stops you from reaching your potential. Or, you know, lack of a better way to say it nicely, piss on San Francisco. They had an opportunity to have me. They never really gave me a shot. So I'm about to go over here to Dallas and I'm about to show them what I got. I don't know which way Trey is. Nobody does now. We will know in a year or two.
Yeah.
And then, so Dan Gilbert says, as a Dallas fan, it's plain and simple. He a cheap QB with ton of upside. If he does not work out, it was a fourth. Why not do it?
Yeah.
I mean, no one's. Here's the thing. No one's saying Dallas. Why did you do this? No one's saying that.
Right.
Everyone's saying San Francisco. You spent multiple first round picks, excuse me, to move up and get this guy, and now you've traded him for a fourth round pick. That's what people are saying. Nobody's saying, "Oh, Dallas is stupid for doing this trade. Why did Dallas do that?" No one's saying that. Everybody say, "Okay, Dallas. You know, worst case, like you said, it's a fourth round pick. You know, you got a guy that you can see maybe put him into the correct situation. He's that guy.
Yeah.
We'll see." So, sir, any final thoughts from you?
I would just say this as simply as I possibly can. I have no bitter feelings or ill will towards Trey Lance, and under normal circumstances, I would wish him all the best in his future endeavors.
But he went to Dallas.
But as long as you get that star on your helmet, I hope nothing good ever happens to you, sir. At least not on the
but you
football
have,
field.
but you have to admit this was not Trey's choice, right? Your team damned him to Dallas.
I mean, they did, but he still plays there, so
I mean, I feel where you're coming from.
yeah, yeah. So I
I
can't.
never like, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I hope that Trey Lance wins in life off the field, but on the field, as long as he has that star on, I can't do it, sir.
Well, I hope that Trey plays well, but that he always loses as long as he has a star on his helmet. How about
Yeah.
that?
I mean, that's
But long story short, as long as he has a star on his helmet, we are not happy with it. We're not happy with anybody that has a star on their helmet. That's just kind of how things go here and many other places.
Yeah.
All right. So with that being said, we're going to move over to another trade that happened, and that was Isaiah Simmons being traded to the Washington Commanders. And I'm checking the pick that he was. I had it up earlier, but got a little frozen there and lost it.
While you're pulling it up, I'll just point out I do see there's a comment from Anthony Price also said it's hard to get a higher pick if you don't have any tape on Trey. So I mean, yeah, if you really haven't had much of a chance to see him play and there's not a lot of tape on him, it's hard to really put a high value on him, right?
Yeah. So Anthony Price says he was traded to the Giants. So we all know. Oh, sorry, I did say Commanders. You're right. It's the Giants, sir. My bad. We all know that, but it was for a 7th-round pick, which is what I was looking up. So thanks for clarifying that, Anthony. Good job. If I had the yay, I would give it to you, but I don't have it. But yeah, so got traded to the Giants for a 7th-round pick. So, what are your thoughts on Isaiah Simmons, a former number 8 overall pick, getting traded for a 7th-round pick? And I have another question regarding these two gentlemen, which is why we're starting out with them after you answer.
Yeah, I mean, this one is obviously a little bit simpler because we're talking about a linebacker versus a quarterback here, right? But still a top 10 pick that you gave up, and he obviously hasn't lived up to what you were hoping for him to do as a top 10 pick, but he hasn't been horrible, right? And to me, the Giants got an absolute steal to give up a 7th-round pick for this guy is an absolute steal. Uh, but you know, man, this is the Cardinals. They clearly are doing everything they can shy of trading Buda Baker to make sure that they get that number 1 pick this year.
Yeah, I just want to say, hey, when we call about Buda Baker, pick the phone up and stop playing, Arizona. It's you can thank us for having a head coach. The least you can do is listen to our offer for Buda Baker, and we need to make that before the season because once you see him actually coach, yeah, you might not ever pick the phone up for us again. But in regards to this, I think Buda Baker's a guy. I mean, Buda Baker on the mind now. Isaiah Simmons is a guy who has a lot of versatility, and they kind of played him a little bit of everywhere. They never let him like settle into a position, and
Yeah.
that's a big problem when you're versatile and good enough to play in multiple positions. Good size, good speed, moves his hips well, right? So he can play a little
Hmm.
bit of corner, play safety, play linebacker, and it's hard. It's kind of like Michael Parsons for the Cowboys, right? You can't just ask that guy to go and fit into a box. You have to basically say, what is your best skills? Go do that,
Yeah.
right? Versus, oh, we want you to be this, and then sometimes we want you to be this, and sometimes we want you to be this. So hopefully with the Giants, he'll get the opportunity to settle on a position. You know, they have a good defensive coordinator there that I think will use him properly in Wink Martindale. So he'll have an opportunity to learn. He'll have an opportunity to get a position. They'll have an opportunity to assess him and say, okay, based on field, which I'm sure they're already done, and then when he's in the building as well, we think he can fit in here for us, right? And
Yeah.
I think that's the big thing. When you're drafting a guy that's kind of like a hybrid player because he can play multiple positions, you have to decide how you're going to use him. It can be in different roles, but it just has to be kind of like confirmed and there for him so that he knows how to play, how to prepare. When he's coming in one week and he's playing here, another week he's playing here, part of the game he's playing here, part of the game he's playing here. It's hard for a player to adjust to that. It's hard for a player to adapt to that. So I think that's where we're going to see a better Simmons in New York because he's going to get that opportunity.
Yeah.
And then the other question I had on those two picks is so we got two guys, both drafted in the top 10,
Hmm.
and they've both already been traded before their contracts were up.
Yeah.
Do you think that this is a situation where teams need to be a little more aware of what they're drafting as far as when I ask that, I mean, we draft a lot, teams draft a lot, let's say, based on potential, right?
Hmm.
Maybe not necessarily that this player fits what we do, but potential.
Yeah.
So do you think that teams need to start realizing, hey, even if it may not be as great of a talent, let me go with the best guy available that fills the need that we have, and not just a guy that we think we could build around. When you're looking at top 10 picks.
I mean, it's always going to come down to that question, right? Of best player available versus need, and obviously, in an ideal world, you get that perfect combination of the two, right?
Mhm.
Um, the thing is, evaluating talent is such an imprecise thing to begin with, right? I mean, you look at a guy like Simmons, and like you said, very versatile. You feel like, oh man, we can plug this guy in so many different places. We can do so many different things with him. And you get excited about what that potential is. And the smart thing to do would have been to pick one position for him,
Mhm.
allow him to really excel at that position. And then as he gets comfortable in that position, then yeah, if you want to move him around a little bit and try to have him do some different things, put him in different places and alignments and things like that, you can do that, right? So to me, it's not so much that that was a bad pick. You just used him very poorly. And honestly, the thing that surprises me the most about the fact they're trading him is you have a brand new coaching staff that's coming in. You would think they'd want to have that guy to stick around at least for a year and see, like, hey, can we maybe get more out of him this year than what the previous coaching staff did? So I found it just interesting that they decided to move on from him. In San Francisco with Trey Lance, it was clearly a little bit different story. I think part of it is you have to remember that was the 21 draft, which means we were still kind of dealing with COVID. There were still some restrictions on private workouts and all that kind of stuff. And so the evaluation process that year, especially for a quarterback, was a little bit different than what it normally would be. And so I think that that may have played a part in it. But I think that was a poor evaluation. Like you identified what you wanted, right? You traded up because you knew that Jimmy Garoppolo couldn't stay healthy. You knew you needed a quarterback. You knew you wanted to go out and get a playmaker. You knew exactly what you wanted that person to add to the offense. You basically did everything right. It's just at the end of the day, you were down to two guys and you chose wrong. That that's basically what happened. And at the end of the day, that's going to happen. It doesn't matter who you are. It doesn't matter how good of a evaluator you are. There's always going to be that one time, at least, that you're going to fall in love with a guy for the wrong reasons and you're going to make the wrong selection. It happens.
That's fair. I'll just simply add this to the 49ers one, right? So them drafting Trey Lance was like, when you see this girl, right? And you want to date her, everybody tells you don't do it. Everybody's like, bruh, shouldn't date her. But you say, no, 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 no. I like her. I'm gonna date her. I don't care what nobody has to say. And then she cheats on you like everybody said she would. That's essentially what happened with the 49ers with this. But like he said, in their mind, this was the person they wanted. And that's a fair assessment. We always talk about on this show how you decide what you want and then you go get it, right? You decide you have a rubric of some sort in place to look for what you want.
Yep.
Sometimes you make the right decision, sometimes you don't. For these two organizations, it looks like they didn't make the right decision in the first round, the top 10, but that's okay. There's no team that can say every top 10 pick they've had um, has worked out. There's no team that can say every first round pick has worked out. Jalen Reagor, Philadelphia Eagles,
Yeah.
for example.
Yeah.
So, those things happen. But yeah, so we'll move on. We'll do this quick, man, because what we're going to do for the college football segment, we went a little longer on this than I thought we would. So for the college football segment, I'm going to ask you the questions. I'm going to let you answer the questions so that way we can, get through the conferences real quick. But before we get to that, wanted to quickly just go through what 7 teams do you think as of right now from the AFC are going to be your playoff teams?
Hmm. Let me let me just pull up the list here just so I don't have to try to remember who is who because
So
my
why you
my brain
why
is
you doing?
scrambling at the moment. No, I got it up. We're good.
Okay.
So let's see. So I'm gonna say out of the East, I've got the Bills winning, right? So I'm gonna put the Bills as one. Out of the West, I got the Chiefs, so they're gonna be one of the playoff teams. The
Mhm.
North, I got the Bengals winning, so they're gonna be three. and then I got the Jags win the South, so that's going to be 4.
Mm-hmm.
So the 3 wild cards, I'm definitely taking the Ravens. I'm definitely taking the Dolphins, assuming that Tua stays healthy. If Tua doesn't stay healthy, I will replace them with the Jets.
Okay.
Um, and so to me, it comes down to honestly the Browns and the Chargers, and I'm going to pick the Browns.
So I'm gonna go with the same 4 winning the divisions. I'm actually going to. I'll go Ravens with an asterisk as well if they can stay healthy in jail. Um, my other 2 are going to be, if they're healthy, Miami and the Jets. If Miami's not healthy, I would replace them with the Chargers. I think the Chargers are the cusp team, but I just don't trust them getting in the playoffs.
Yep.
And if they do find a win, I think they're going to be out quickly. So the Chargers would be my alternate if
Yep.
something happens with the Ravens or the Dolphins. But
Yeah. So
you
we
know,
so we both agree that the Chargers are a cusp team. Yeah.
yeah,
Okay.
yeah. And then in the NFC, who do you have making the playoffs?
So division winners, I'm going to go Philly. I'm going to go San Francisco. I'm going to go Detroit, and I the South is just such a tough one. It's either going to be the Falcons or the Saints. Um, I'm going to lean Falcons, but in terms of wild card teams, the Seahawks and the Cowboys are going to pretty much be there, and then it comes down to me between the Giants and the Vikings, and I like the Giants a little better in that scenario.
So I'm going to go the Saints in the South. I'm definitely going to go the Lions in the North. I'm going to go the 49ers in the West. Eagles and Cowboys in the East. Eagles winning, Cowboys the first wild card. So then I think that Seattle's going to get another wild card in my scenario, just because there's not a lot of really great teams. And I actually think that the Commanders are going to get the last wild card spot this year. I think they're going to be just a little bit better than the Giants this year. I think the Giants would be the next team. I just see the wheels falling off with the Vikings. They're not going to have a running game because they got rid of their running back, right? So
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I feel like if the Vikings get in there, it's going to be like as a 7 seed, and
yeah,
yeah,
so yeah, that's pretty much getting through that, man. Like I said, I want to leave you enough time to really dig into the college football talk. 'Cause I know you're a big college football guy. So talking about the 5 power conferences here, right?
hmm
So for those conferences, which teams from the Power 5 do you think have a chance to make the playoffs?
we're still on just 14 this year, right? It goes to 12 next year.
Correct, just for
Yeah.
this year.
Okay. Um. So obviously we we're going to be looking at SEC. I think there's 3 teams that have a chance to get in. Obviously, all 3 aren't going to get in, but I think
Hmm.
Georgia, LSU, and Alabama all have a chance.
Okay.
ACC, it's Florida State and Clemson. They're only 2 that realistically. Even if somebody else wins the ACC, they're not getting in.
Hmm.
Those are the only 2 teams. Maybe if Miami could somehow do something completely unexpected this year, they're a big enough name, but I don't think either one of us had that expectation for them. In the Big Ten, I mean, I feel like it's Ohio State, Michigan, right? One of those 2 teams is going to get in. When I look at the Big 12, I think this goes back to, Oklahoma and Texas, the 2 big names there. It will be interesting to see if you can possibly get a TCU or somebody like that in again, but we don't really know what they're going to look like this year. When I go over to the Pac 12, this is where it gets interesting, right? USC, you've got the returning Heisman Trophy winner. So they're going to be an intriguing team to watch. Washington is going to be another really intriguing team to watch out there. But the thing is, we almost are guaranteed that 2 SEC or 2 Big Ten teams are getting in. And with the ACC doing away with conferences, which means you could actually have Florida State and Clemson rematch each other in the championship game, I think that all but guarantees the ACC a slot in the Final Four, which means the Pac-12 is probably going to get left out in their last year.
So we got a couple of comments here. So Daniel Gilbert says Bama, FSU, A&M, and Michigan. Definitely not A&M. That's a terrible homer pick.
I was gonna say let's all make sure that people understand that's homerism at its finest right there.
You clearly have to be an A&M fan to even put them in a league with those three. Anthony Price says I have Ohio State winning it all. My sleeper is Michigan, so he's jumping a little bit of ahead, but he wouldn't know that. But go ahead. And then he says TCU will fall. Okay.
Yeah, I mean, I don't expect TCU to be as good, but I mean, let's see what they do. Let's see if they can reload or not. But I don't expect them to.
Makes sense. And then 3 players from each conference that you wanted to watch out for.
Yeah, so I'm going to give you. I'm going to try to keep this somewhat short. So
we'll give you time. So what you got to do?
Yeah, so in the SEC, I've got a couple of different guys. I've got 2 quarterbacks and I've got a linebacker / edge rusher for you. So we'll start with Harold Perkins Jr. from LSU. So last year, 8.5 sacks, 3 forced fumbles, and an INT. Very much similar to what we were talking about with Isaiah Simmons earlier. He's a guy who can play in multiple positions for you. You can line him up at linebacker. You can line him up on the edge. He's an impact defender, right? Crazy thing is he was a true freshman last year putting up those numbers. And he actually led LSU in tackles for loss at 13, had 7.5 sacks. Well, it's actually 8.5, and 14 quarterback hurries and the 3 forced fumbles. For a true freshman, that's kind of crazy. So be very interesting to see second year in the system what he can actually do. Then a couple quarterbacks. Will Rogers from Mississippi State. Last season, 3,974 yards and 35 touchdowns. The most accomplished passer in the SEC. He's actually the only quarterback in SEC history with over 1,000 career completions. So, a guy who has put up a ton of numbers. It's going to be very interesting to see what happens with him this year. See if he can, earn himself an opportunity to get drafted in the NFL. And then a guy that I think a lot of eyes are going to be on is Joe Milton III in Tennessee, taking over for Hendon Hooker. Played really well at the end of the year. His stats aren't going to be eye-popping from last season, but obviously played very well in that Orange Bowl game against Clemson and has a lot of high expectations coming into the season. Do you have anybody from the SEC that you want to throw out there?
No, sir. This is going to be all you. I'm letting you cook.
Okay. So over in the ACC, I've got 2 potential Heisman candidates that we're going to talk about. One is obviously Drake May, quarterback for UNC. His numbers last year, 4,321 passing yards and 38 touchdowns. Ridiculous. Right.
NCAA football college game, not real play, but game stats, right?
and on top of it, he ran for almost 700 yards. I remember at the beginning of the year, it's like him and the other guy, and they were kind of debating which one was going to be. And like after 1 week, they're like, he's the starter. That's it. It's a wrap. Contest over.
Pretty much.
Yeah. Another guy that I think is going to be a potential Heisman candidate here with everything they've brought in and put around him and where he is my guy at Florida State, Jordan Travis.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's going to be very interesting to watch because Jordan Travis every year has gotten a little bit better. I remember when he first got a chance to come in, Dan Gilbert, who's over here in the chat, actually called me up after watching like a few minutes of the game and goes, "Can he even actually throw the football? I haven't seen him throw the ball yet." So to go from that to, actually getting a little hype even nationally for potentially being a Heisman candidate, it's just been really cool to watch him grow as a quarterback. And I'll be interested to see can he take that next step this season. And then I've got to stick with my Knowles for my third pick too, because we got a guy who, if he plays well this season, could work himself into being a top 5 pick in the NFL draft next year, and that is Jared Verse. An absolute monster. Started his career at the FBS level, transferred from Albany, and or the FCS level at Albany, excuse me. Came in, had 9 sacks in his first year at Florida State. So it's going to be very fun to watch and see can he take it to the next level this year and really where he will end up being there. I do see Anthony asked about Jaden Daniels, and that was the fourth guy that was going to be on my list in case I needed a backup for the SEC. I will say I think that he is a really, really special player. If it were not for Will Rogers, I think that he could actually be hands down the best quarterback in the SEC this year. But Rogers just puts up just ridiculous stats. So, but I think he's going to be really good. I hope that he's not that good week 1.
Want to highlight another, I guess we can just call this blasphemy. He says Jimbo Ball, baby, Mr. Dan Gilbert, on while he had the audacity.
He doesn't even remember. He doesn't even mean that.
Just had to point it out, man. Just had to point it out. Yeah. Even interactive blasphemy is still interactive.
Yeah. You go over to the Big Ten, right? First name we absolutely have to talk about in the Big Ten, Marvin Harrison Jr.
Obviously.
Because listen, let's be legit. We can forget about, look, we could talk about 1,263 yards, 14 touchdowns. That doesn't even scratch the surface of what this dude does. Okay. I will sit here and tell you to my dying day, I don't care how Georgia fans feel about his comment. If this guy does not get hurt, Georgia doesn't even win the national championship last year because they're not playing in it, because they're not getting by Ohio State. That's how he was destroying them in that game. You had something to add there, sir?
Saucy. That's all. Just a little saucy.
Yeah. A couple other guys that I'm interested in. Some lesser known names, maybe for some people. Abdul Carter from Penn State. He actually was second on the team with 56 tackles last year, but also had 6.5 sacks. And on his way to earning a second All Big Ten recognition, became the 8th linebacker in school history to record at least 10 tackles for loss and 6 sacks in a season. You got to be a bad boy to go get 10 tackles for loss, right? That means you're not just sitting back waiting on people to come to you. You're going out and attacking the football. So I think he's a huge part of that Penn State defense. And if they're going to have a level of success this year, he's going to be one of the main reasons. Another guy that I really like is Cooper DeJean from Iowa, cornerback. Last year, he played opposite of a guy that's now in the NFL, which means he got targeted a lot. And what did he do with those targets? 5 INTs, 75 tackles, 19 of them solo. And oh yeah, those 5 INTs, took 3 of them back to the house. So, and he's got NFL size himself. So a guy who might be playing on Sundays in the near future. I go over to the Big 12 and got a couple names here for you. So Cooper Beebe from K-State. Don't really usually talk a lot about offensive linemen, but this guy might be one of the best offensive linemen in the country. Didn't allow a single sack last year. Okay. And they throw the ball a lot in the Big 12. So that was a lot of protection he had to do. He actually got first team all Big 12 honors at left tackle in 2021 and then moved to left guard. It was named the Big 12 Offensive Lineman of the Year. So to be able to go and move from left tackle to guard and still basically put at the same level of both positions, that's something to be said there. That's how you get it. That's how you get on a list like this as the offensive lineman.
Yeah, good versatility, definitely.
Yeah. Jalen Ford from Texas. I know College Coach is here right now. He'd be giving us a hook 'em horn sign. He'd be excited to talk about some Texas guys. Linebacker, 4 INTs, 119 tackles, 10 tackles for loss last season. He actually is probably the best linebacker they've had in a while. Just an absolute monster. He's going to be a guy that's in that running for the Big 12 Defensive Player of the Year this year. And then finally, we've been devaluing running backs, so I wanted to give a running back a little love here. I really like Devin Neal, Kansas running back. He's the only Big 12 running back who had 1,000 yards last year that's actually going to be coming back. He was also the first KU player to have 200 yards rushing and 100 yards receiving against Oklahoma State. He ended up actually putting up 224 yards rushing in that game and had 6.1 yards per carry. So going to be a guy that you'll want to keep an eye on and see like what he does. Along with there's some other running backs too that I didn't list, but definitely some guys you want to keep an eye on. And then finally move over to the Pac-12. So a guy that I think a lot of people are going to be very interested to see is Travis Hunter, who, originally was supposed to come to Florida State, decided to go play for Deion Sanders, and then followed Deion to Colorado. So this is going to really be his first year getting to play against FBS competition. So I think a lot of people are going to be very excited to watch that and just see how he does. But, he did have 19 tackles, 8 pass breakups, and 2 INTs last year. So definitely got to keep an eye on and see what he does. They could have a really good secondary out there in Colorado. A guy that just fun to watch. If you didn't watch a lot of Pac-12 games, you probably don't know a lot about this guy, but Michael Penix Jr. from Washington. He actually transferred to Washington from Indiana and put up 4,641 yards and 31 touchdowns. Now, it's kind of crazy because we talked about Drake May's numbers earlier. And when people are looking at Drake May, they're like, oh, he's a Heisman candidate, whatever. But, I feel like Michael Penix Jr. did not get that same love. This could be a very explosive offense this year. He's got a couple of nice wide receivers as well. And then finally, Dorian Singer, wide receiver from USC. Now, his numbers aren't necessarily like super eye-catching. 66 catches, 1,105 yards, and 6 touchdowns. But here's what I want to point out, and this is why he's a player to watch for me. He put those numbers up at Arizona. He's now transferred to USC, where he's going to get to play with the reigning Heisman Trophy winner. Could get exciting. So those are my players for you, sir.
Okay. I like it. Good mix of players. We've got a lineman, got a running back in there. Some positional players, a couple of QBs.
I mean, you made it hard on me. Tell me I can only do 3 per conference, but
Hey man, you gotta cap it because right. If you just say, hey, do whatever you want, hey, it could get real wild.
It'll be all night.
Right. So sleeper teams. Give me a sleeper team from each conference.
All right. So let's start with the SEC. Now, let me ask you real quick before I answer this question. How are we describing it as a sleeper team? Or just a team that's going to exceed expectations, or are we talking about a team that could actually potentially win the conference?
However you want to determine sleeper teams, whichever way you would like to interpret it, sir, it is open for interpretation.
Okay. I'm going to go with teams that are going to probably outperform expectations because I
Okay.
don't think that some of these teams can necessarily win their conference, right? But in the SEC, I think that you're going to have a team, a couple of teams that are a little bit overhyped. But I think one team that's going to be a little underhyped is Arkansas. I think they're going to actually do better than what a lot of people expect out of them this year. In the ACC, uh, man, because I feel like you had the big three, and then it's just such a fall off after that. Um, I'm going to go with Louisville. I think Louisville is a team that's going to exceed expectations this year. People aren't expecting a lot of them, and I think they're actually going to be pretty decent. The Big 12, uh, man, trying to remember who's left in the Big 12 at this point. Who's leaving, who's coming. I think that TCU, I'm going to put they're not going to do what they did last year, right? They're not going to make the playoffs again, but I don't think the fall off is going to be as big as people think. I think they're actually going to still be a pretty good team. When I look at the Big Ten, I feel like Penn State is that team that's either going to completely fall off a bus and end up being highly overrated, or they're going to be the most underrated team. Like they could kind of go either way with this, depending on how you view them now. I feel like a lot of people are counting them out, so I'm going to go with Penn State as being my most underrated team in the Big Ten. And finally, for the Pac-12, I know they're in the top 25, and I know that they're getting a little bit of love, but I don't think they're getting enough love. I think Oregon State is going to make some noise this year. I think they're going. I think they're the most underrated team in the Pac-12.
And then one final question, and then one other thing to talk about. So we went with sleepers.
Mhm.
Now, what about your overrated team from each conference?
All right, so I'm just gonna start back with the Pac-12 here, and I'm gonna say Utah. I
Okay.
think Utah is gonna be the most overrated team there. In the Big 12, Oklahoma. Definitely Oklahoma to me is gonna be the most overrated. They're gonna get so much hype this year in anticipation of going to the big or to the SEC, and I just don't think it's going to end up happening. Um, I'm gonna go Michigan State in the Big Ten. I just I think that everyone's kind of expecting that they're gonna bounce back, and I don't think they are. I just don't think they're gonna be a good football team. Tennessee is the most overrated team to me in the SEC. I Milton could end up proving me wrong there, but I just don't believe in Tennessee. And in the ACC, I'm going to have to go with North Carolina because Drake may put up great numbers. He may even possibly win a Heisman Trophy this year, but they lost a lot of weapons and no one is talking about it.
Fair enough. Fair enough. Fair enough. So, ladies and gentlemen, you have witnessed our football guide, college football guide. I mean, hey, I talk college football too, but I wanted to give my co-host an opportunity to let y'all know his vast knowledge of the sport of college football. So, last thing I wanted to talk about, a little bit more of a somber note. So Terry Funk, a longtime professional wrestler, better known by his name Chainsaw Charlie, passed away. He was 79. Had some health issues, but still tough. If you're a fan of professional wrestling, or just guys that have names that you're synonymous with, tough loss. But also, an even tougher loss. I actually found out while doing a show yesterday was at 36 years old, Wyndham Rotunda, better known as Bray Wyatt, passed away. Found out he had a heart attack. He had been suffering with some heart issues, and then he had COVID, which exacerbated the heart issues. And then he was doing better. He had been out because of the said issue, and then he had a heart attack yesterday morning and passed away.
Yeah.
So, it's always hard when you lose those guys that are legends that have kind of been around, that have had a chance to kind of have their career play out, retire. But it's even harder when you lose a guy that was just kind of entering his prime and kind of getting to that point. He'd been between the WWE and the World Championship. He had been champion, I believe, Universal Championship, I believe, 3 times, the heavyweight champion, as long as some other accolades. But this is a guy who, a great creative mind. He had created a whole alternate character universe that, was intriguing. Something I really liked. I wouldn't say he was my favorite wrestler, but he was my favorite like personality because he was so unique and different with the way that he did the whole the Bray Wyatt thing, where he was kind of like the guy in the rocking chair and all that. And then he had switched into the Fiend, and that was coming back as kind of a different, unique character, but didn't get a chance to have those things play out.
Yeah.
So for anyone that watched wrestling over the last couple of years, I know you've seen him, seen what he's done, and man, it's tough. A lot of wrestlers are taking hard. A lot of fans are taking hard, especially since it's cut down at 36 years old, man. Any thoughts on Bray or even Terry Funk? Any memories you have of him or anything like that, man?
Yeah, I mean, Terry Funk is a guy that, growing up watching wrestling as a kid, I saw a lot, really one of the pioneers of hardcore wrestling. So, definitely a big loss. And, I know, a lot of times people go, oh, yeah, but, he was 79 years old or whatever. And, I just feel like, as I'm getting older, as my mom's getting older, I don't look at things from that perspective anymore, right? I look at things from the perspective of, this is someone who, was, probably, father, grandfather, that there's families out there now, without, a loved one. So, there's also a lot of fans that, this might be, difficult news for them to hear because they grew up watching, this person. And then, like you said, anytime you're having people die under the age of 40 years old, I mean, that's just, so young. Like you really haven't had a chance to live life yet. And Bray Wyatt is a guy that, like you said, not going to sit there and say like, oh, one of my favorite, wrestlers or anything like that. But definitely had a lot of creativity, did a lot of different things in terms of the characters. Very good mic worker, would literally like have the crowd in the palm of his hand. So, definitely a big loss to the business. But I know that, he also, had a wife and a small child. So, obviously a huge loss from that perspective as well.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree with Terry Funk, man. Chainsaw Charlie, loved him. A lot of battles with Cactus Jack, teamed up with Cactus Jack a lot. Alternate personality, one of many for Mick Foley. Not sure who that is. When it comes to Bray Wyatt, man, there's so much that's already been said. So what I'll do is I'll talk about what WWE is doing for him, so you can see his impact. So WWE strapped everything for their SmackDown episode tonight, and they're changing everything, and they're doing a tribute to him and Terry Funk. Roman Reigns is going to present his family with the Universal Championship, and it's going to be officially retired. So there will not be more Universal Championships. He won't be walking around with 80 belts anymore. But that belt's going to be given to Bray Wyatt's family. I'm sure they're going to put the Bray Wyatt plates on there and everything. So that's a great symbolic gesture, and that's not something that I don't think the company asked him to do, but because of the respect he has for Wyndham Rotunda, he's doing that.
Yeah.
And I'm not watching the show live because obviously I'm doing this another show after this, but I'm definitely going to watch this episode, this memorial episode for Terry Funk and Bray Wyatt, man, just kind of see how they do things and everything later on the night. So if you're on my timeline, please don't go spurting everything out. Can we hold some? Can we act like we can hold water, people, until people get a chance to see it? But yeah, man.
They can.
I know. Just hoping, man. Just hoping. I'll just stay off social media. They'll take care of everything. But I just wanted to throw that out there, man. Like I said, we lose a lot of people, and we don't get a chance to highlight them every week because so much has happened in the world of sports. But I felt like these were two guys because of their importance to me, right? And to I feel like a lot of people in my age bracket, and even some people younger, that wanted to at least touch on them and give them a few minutes here at the end of the show. With that being said, We're going to get ready here in about 9 minutes. We're going to be coming back at you. Well, I am, with the very first episode of NFL Gridiron Flicks. And basically, what we're going to talk on there is we're going to do a review of the entire AFC and get you ready with a primer for that. Next week, we'll do NFC, and then we'll be rolling into the NFL. So, Steven, before we get out of here, man, any last words?
No, I mean, I just want to, keep it really simple and just, let Cowboys fans know that y'all still aren't going to be able to beat us if we see you in the playoffs.
Maybe they got Trey Lance so they can see if they can pick his brain.
I mean, look, Pete Carroll been trying it for years, and and then he did none last year, so
still an execution thing for real. But yeah, so with that being said, we're rolling out of here. Make sure you're back. We'll be back at 7:30 on time next week. Just had a couple of delays this week, but hey, things happen. But with that being said, see you guys next week. Don't forget 10:30 a.m. WDJYFM.com. Check out your boys. PlayCallers Sports Talk.
10 a.m., sir. 10 a.m.
I always want to say p.m. It's 10 a.m.
Yep.
It's something wrong with my brain. Guys, have a great night.